A long time, right?
Yes, sir.
Anyway, bonjour mesdames, messieurs. C'est la présentation de Jacques Roumiac, and I'll do it in English, okay? Right, first thing you need to know, OpenWIS is some extension to GeoNetwork, okay? The things we've done to it horrify your own. Structure of the talk, bit of background. Any meteorologists in the room? I don't see any, so I'm going to stick with a meteorological background because we just have a different view of the world from geographers, right? We're just different, right? And then I'll just say some of the bits about what we're going through to get this out into open source. Okay, WMO. First you have to realize all meteorologists have coordinated what they've been doing for at least 100 years, if not 120 years, and certainly for the last 60 via the United Nations, the World Met Organization, right? So WMO. And we do actually have a shared culture. So I could go into the Met service in Beijing, Moscow, Washington, Brasilia, pick up a weather chart and use it. Okay, and vice versa, right? They can do the same thing. Right? Okay, so we've got a global infrastructure that's creaking at the seams. It predates the internet. It's an extranet. Lots of point-to-point links, very robust. All 191 members of the United Nations WMO are committed to updating it. It's a strategic target. And the telecoms that it all sits on is store and forward, point-to-point, lots of point-to-point networks, which means if I want to send a message from Exeter to Sofia in Bulgaria, Offenbach in between has to know, right? Because the lines go from here to Offenbach and then to Bulgaria. It's extremely resilient, and it's extremely inflexible, and it's expensive. But tsunami warning messages get around the world in seconds. It's safety critical. It's used for seismic data as well as meteorological data and oceanographic data. Right, and one thing it's never really done is request reply. Right? Because if you want something that's robust and resilient, you do not allow request reply because that's kind of ad hoc, you can't predict it. Anyway, that's where we want to move to. And WMO decided more than 10 years ago it was going to have a global catalogue of all meteorological data in the world. That's not just real time, but also all archive data, all climatological data. Bottom line is we don't trust Google, right? Okay, we do not want Google to own our stuff. The other feature is there's going to be a cache. So if you were starting from scratch, you would not design a point-to-point network joining 191 members. You'd set up a whacking big database, everybody stuffs their data in, and you pull your data out. Then you argue, where would that database be? It'll be in Washington. No, it won't. It'll be in Moscow. No, it won't. It'll be in Beijing. Okay. So we've had that argument. The catalog and the cache are going to be globally distributed. How about 1 or 2 centers per continent? Fine, because that addresses what we call the small asteroid problem. Right, so some of the services from the UK are backed up in the States and vice versa. Some of our services from the UK are backed up in France, all addressing the small asteroid problem. We haven't had any small asteroids or big ones, that's fine. And the structure is there's some global centers, there's probably going to be about a dozen, some specialized centers that have international and regional responsibilities, but more than national responsibilities, and there's lots of national centers. That's the kind of structure. It's there's been lots and lots of technical work and experiments and pilots and stuff, and eventually the great and the good all sat in Geneva and said we'll have it all implemented by 2015. And it's been a large part of my job. Right, so there's a plan, and of course the big thing that's different, and the thing that that Jerome likes, in the past meteorologists just produced loads and loads of data. Now they're going to have to produce loads and loads of data with metadata, right? We've changed the rules. Everybody has to produce metadata for their data. So the global centers will have a catalogue of everything. The regional centers, the specialized centers, will have catalogues of their stuff, and the national centers will just update their entries in the global catalogue. The global catalogue will also mirror the specialized centers. So you just go to your nearest node and you search for stuff and you find it and you get pointed to it wherever it happens to be. The catalog is never more than 24 hours of date, so we're doing the harvesting over the OI-PMH protocol. I'll mention that later. So everything's reasonably up to date, but it's not. The catalog doesn't talk about instances of data. So you may have a time series of data that's updated every hour. Well, we're not going to update the catalog every hour, right? We're going to update it infrequently, or maybe never for that time series, because the time series will always be being updated. So it's a quite a high level catalog. But for data sets that are closed, yeah, it's fine, right? And the other issue is you want your messages, and if you want to get data out of the cache, it's got to be end-to-end less than 2 minutes, right? We've decided that is the real figure we want. We actually want much better than that for tsunami warning services, because otherwise people die. And we think we can do that, because we do that now anyway. And we are linking into the existing extranet, the existing telecoms network, so at least we've got continuity. And then as people migrate to new systems, we'll start using new technology, new dissemination systems. And this is the long haul. We're in for the long haul. It's going to take decades. Right, catalog. It's 19115, with expressed as XML, which is the 19139 standard. And then you can stick in services as well as data. That's the 1919. WMO has actually produced its own restrictive profile of 19115. There's a lot of generality in there, and we said we don't need that full generality, and then so we've pinned it down, and it is a restrictive profile. There's no extensions. It's restrictive, so it's a strict subset, and we've all agreed around the world what goes in there. We're in the process of updating it to version 1.3, and we'll update it again because we know that 19115 is going to change next year. And it's going to change quite significantly, actually, my understanding, because the ANSI process is working its way through because it's 5 years old. The search is ISO 29350, which used to be known as the ANSI Z3950, and that's the search protocol that came from the library community. So it actually knows about narrower and broader search terms if you don't find anything, and it can federate searches to other nodes. And the SRU 1.3 is search and retrieval by URL. So it's all that stuff in the search box, right? And CSW is optional. In terms of dissemination and how you copy the rack caches between caches and how you do publications and subscription, none of that's been standardized yet because we felt the standards weren't mature enough. So for example, the idea we chose the 19115 and the 23950 is, suppose I want to search on some climate change data to do with deforestation in Vietnam. Well, it may be the definitive document is not in Vietnam, but it's in Paris on paper, right? Which is quite likely. So therefore it would be nice if we could actually plug into the libraries and find out, federate searches that far, and that's the long-term plan. Nobody's done it yet. We started a procurement to get some software in the Europe. We had a kind of a start in 2008. That fell apart for various reasons, mainly to do with money. It just cost too much. So that was led by Deutsche Wetterdienst, the German Net Service. So they decided to go and do their own thing. And in 2009, the UK and Meteo France started a collaboration. Meteo France's commercial arm joined, and then Korea and the Australians joined, and we shared the money and split it 5 ways. And we went to an open ITT, under European tender. It was run by a company called ACA, which is French. Surprise, surprise, they're about 300 meters from Meteo France. And started writing what we now call OpenWIS. WIS is the WMO information system. It's about the simplest we get it, right? And we envisaged it would be made of open source as much as possible. Right? We suggested to the vendors some possibilities, and the route ACA took was GeoNetwork, and lots and lots of middleware, and OpenAM used to be known as OpenSSO, right? Before Oracle bought it. Now it's called OpenAM, independent of Oracle. That's the security layer. So out of the total bit of code that's OpenWIS, probably about 20% is GeoNetwork. And the other 80% to do with the caching, dissemination, monitoring, industrialization. Now that software was accepted last year. It's still in warranty, and we are now deciding to. We made the decision in 2009 we would release it as open source. We had a big battle with Météo France's international commercial arm. They didn't want to do that. They were outvoted. It's quite interesting watching Météo France. So this is not part of Jacques' presentation, right? It's quite interesting watching Météo France and their commercial arm argue. So you don't normally see that in public, right? Now, Météo France commissioned a small ITT from a company called Altaway just to analyze the software we've got from ACCA, independently of ACCA, to see what the intellectual issues are, what the legal problems about chopping the software up, or whether whether we can just kind of stick a LPGL on it and away we go. So they did an analysis. They said it's a modular architecture, which may cause problems because it's a modular architecture. The different modules could be legally considered different bits, and therefore you may need different IPR on each component. What I should say, that modular architecture has been very effective. We've been running our node of the catalog for 2 years now, and if certain parts go down for something, right, there's a problem in the computer room, catalog access fails, the other bits don't fail, the dissemination works, or if the dissemination crashes, which is not very often, the catalog just keeps working, or the user interface keeps working. So it is in fact very robust architecture and very resilient. Right? So those are the legal issues. What exactly is being offered as open source? We've got all those other middleware bits, Tomcat, Apache, etc. And it's not quite clear where the boundaries are for the legal content. So some bus can't be redistributed because we built it on the on the enterprise version of JBoss. Right? So there's a bit of work there to turn it into clean that interface up. And there's some bits where we're interfacing the dissemination system to our own internal systems, or accessing our own internal databases. So we specified an interface, but everything on the other side of the interface is ours, right? So we're not going to release that. We'll release the generic interface and say, well, you now go and plug it into your PostGIS, your Oracle, or whatever you want to do, right? Or your file system. Right? So there's so it's a non-trivial problem. So that's the sort of rough architecture. The metadata portal is what takes you, the bottom right is what takes you into GeoNetwork. There's indexing services. So GeoNetwork has Lucene, right? And what ACCA did was they took the Lucene out and they put in Solar, and that has had certain advantages because we can now put quite a lot of and separate it out onto a separate physical machine or virtual machine. So actually, if we want to support, we actually gave them guidance as to how many users we wanted to support, and it's several thousand simultaneously. And so if we just throw hardware at the indexing, it's fine. It actually is quite fast. And the data service is delivering the data once you've identified something in the catalog. You get the record, you click on it, and then it takes you to the data. And if you're entitled and authorized and authenticated, other way around, sorry, if you're authenticated and authorized, you will get the data somehow, depending on what the service is. Now, the security services, they're kind of orthogonal, right? They're all outside, but we think it's really important, right? So the intent of the catalog was it's totally open to anybody in the public, right? And in theory, we will also make the catalog for public data open to anybody in the public, so they could request publicly, freely available data. In the short term, we haven't done that because we're a little bit worried about, certainly in the Met Office, we've got a public website. We've got one of the busiest public websites in Britain. If we forecast snow, we know we're going to get 16 million hits in 2 hours. Right? And it takes quite a bit of infrastructure to look after that. And so if we start saying, oh look, there's all this freely available weather data from anywhere in the world, all you do is click here, you can get it, right, people are a little bit twitchy about having 16 million hits. So for the time being, it's just open to anybody in other Met services around the world, and then we just slowly open up the door, and when we're fairly sure that we can cope with the demand. But that doesn't really impact. It's a clear layer. It's XAML2 and all that kind of stuff, all those security stuff which I don't understand. So then we've had debate within the consortium about what licenses we should use. The French got a bit confused and upset about GPL2. Yes, can we use it? Can't we? No, use it. Is it compatible? Why can't we use GPL version 3? We don't think it's a real issue. So as it's GeoNetworks published under GPL2, is it still under GPL2? Jerome? Yeah, fine. Okay. We don't see that's a problem. And then we had the lawyers in France and the lawyers in the UK and the lawyers in Korea and the lawyers in Australia can't all agree on exactly how they're going to do it. I'm not going to say any more than that. We're still discussing it. Maybe a conflict, may not be a conflict. Blah blah blah. Yeah, should we? There's lots of licenses, right? So we're all going to go and try and do it all under GPL3, unless there's some other stuff, because there's other intellectual property besides the software, such as all the documentation. That's all going to be Creative Commons, whatever BY stands for. Anyway, it's pretty open, right? Fine. Okay. Version 3, and we're going to put it all in GitHub. Yeah, so the lawyers of all the institute, we're government organisations, right? The lawyers have to be happy. Métier France has actually trademarked the OpenWIS.org, but that's going to be shared by everybody. Somebody's just pursuing how they're going to get it registered in. There's some kind of organisational treaty you can sign up to with the World Trade Organization, then it becomes automatically worldwide, right? So, what I say about well, when we release it, we've decided to summarize all of this, we're going to do it in GitHub. Fine, okay? And we're going to use Jira. Yeah, everybody we looked at all this kind of stuff, and there's all the things that the French use that the Brits don't use, and vice versa. So it's going to be GitHub and Jira. So let's skip that. As I just said. Right, fine. Okay. I've said that as well, right? So the source code at present is sitting on Git inside the Met Office and inside Métier France. So once we've sorted out, we go public, it will appear. And then we're going to have to sort of establish how we're going to do all of this. Yeah, who's going to have the intellectual property? Well, we've decided how we're going to do that. And we'll need people to do the architecture, who's going to do the development, how we're going to do the assurance, how we're going to do the committee, what is the community development, how people are going to buy in if they want to spend money on it, how, if you don't spend money on it, what do you get, and how is support managed, right? So we envisage there will be self-support from the community and also commercial support, right? Because basically this software we think will be used in quite a lot of countries around the world. Right, so at present the software is about 70,000 functional points. You can take any old metric you want, really. And we think it probably require about 2 people full-time looking after it. That's fine. We've got to talk to all the other open source people, all the middleware bits to make sure we keep track of what's going on. And we are very keen on better integration with the GeoNetwork, because when this was started in 2009, we took a snapshot of 2.6, or ACCA took a snapshot of 2.6 or whatever it was, or maybe 2.6 with bit 2.8, and it diverged slightly. So GeoCat have actually are just about to deliver a report on how we could merge back into the main trunk, or some bits we can merge into the main trunk. Which bits? There are some bits ACCA have done that Jerome's quite likes. And there's some bits in 2.10 that we quite like and ACCA didn't put in. Right? So there's definitely advantages for both of us to try and merge, even if we never completely converge the two development lines. There's quite a lot of chunks there that are useful to exchange and save on. Necessary step before publication. Well, we've done most of the legal audit, right? We are still reorganizing the code, because as we got it from ACCA, it was a bit ad hoc. It was not really middleware agnostic, and it uses specific versions of JBoss and Apache, etc. So we're trying to make that, as I said, agnostic, so therefore it's easy to install, and it's less of a security risk. Because some of the middleware is a little bit old, that's a security risk. And we've actually just finished our audit, security audit. We did a contract to get somebody to do some documentation that ACCA hadn't really done, or we weren't very happy with. And in fact, the people who did the documentation were the people who were subcontracted by ACCA to write some of the code. So it's fine. We've already set the private GitHub, and we've already reserved a public GitHub. And the lawyers are now busy trying to set up a non-profit limited liability association in Belgium. And they will own the intellectual property right. There will be 5 directors, 1 from each founding organization from the original collaboration, and they will own the IPR. And that was supposed to have happened 3 months ago. It hasn't quite happened yet. Lawyers are talking about it. Yeah, trying to get a Korean lawyer to agree with the Brits and the French and the Australians that they're going to set up an independent organization in Brussels is kind of just takes time. Takes time. We should have chosen Netherlands, shouldn't we, right? There's some estimates of the amount of work we have to do. We're about halfway through lots of it. That's what it actually looks like at the Met Office. That's the public portal. If you just search on OpenWIS, Met Office, etc. GISC stands for Global Information System Center. And you can recognize it's kind of a GeoNetwork thing. And of course, if you do a search, you'll get, did I go the right way? No, it's the wrong way. You get some results back. So that screen's the first 10 results out of 715, looking for Japanese wind on the French system. That's on the French system, as opposed to our system. And the idea between us and France is we've chosen to mirror each other and offer mutual service. And we'll do it in such a way that, okay, you get the same results if you go to China or Japan or Korea or Australia or Washington. You'll find the same results. The Chinese and the Japanese have implemented them completely differently. If you go to Germany, you'll see the same kind of results when you do a search. And Germany has implemented it completely differently using proprietary software, but they're all federated through the OIPMH catalog, protocol, harvesting protocol. What was I going to say? What we do between the UK and France is we'll exchange subscription information, and then if one node goes down, right, if an aeroplane lands on Exeter or there's a small asteroid, France will just keep issuing the forecasts or the products or whatever people have subscribed to. And so that's how we think, right? We really do, and that's how we have implemented the nuclear pollution forecasts. So, for example, UK and France have responsibility for any nuclear pollution forecast in Europe and Africa. So any Met service in the world can ring up and say, I suspect there's been a leak, please can I have a forecast within 10 minutes? And they'll get it, right? But we back each other up because before the Met Office moved to Exeter, it was in Bracknell. And 20 kilometres west of Bracknell was Britain's atom bomb factory. So there's a reasonable chance if there's an accident in Britain, we wouldn't be functioning. So this out-of-country backup is essential. Right, that's where we are. Any questions?
Thank you, Chris. Yeah, we've got a couple of minutes of questions before the switch over to the plenary session. So, questions for anyone?
If you're running a Met service, fine. You're probably interested in this software, right? If you're not running a Met service, you may not be. Okay. I think the key issue is going to be that there'll be some industrial strength stuff we've done that GeoCat can benefit from.
Okay, well, thank you, everybody. If we could round of applause for Chris.
Thank you.